The truth about Africans selling other Africans into slavery. They lied to you, the narrative we were taught for years. One statement has been used to deflect from the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade. Africans sold their own people. This phrase, often repeated in textbooks and casual conversations, has been weaponized to shift blame away from European colonizers. But what if the truth is far more complex, one built on deception, manipulation, and exploitation? What if this narrative itself was a lie, crafted to hide the scale of European brutality and to distort how the slave trade really unfolded? Africa. Before the chains. Before the arrival of European slave ships, Africa was a continent of complex kingdoms, empires, and trading networks. From the Mali Empire to the Kingdom of Benin, African societies were thriving with systems of governance, spirituality, and commerce. Some forms of slavery did exist, often in the form of indentured servitude, debt bondage, or as prisoners of war, but it was vastly different from what Europeans would later bring. A racialized, generational, and commercialized system that would devastate millions, divide, manipulate, conquer. When European traders arrived on African shores in the 15th century, they didn't invade by force, not initially. Instead, they exploited internal rivalries, political instability, and economic desperation. They offered guns, rum, textiles, and trinkets in exchange for captives, creating incentives that distorted existing conflicts. Some African leaders, not fully grasping the nature of chattel slavery in the New World, participated in trade under duress, misunderstanding, or with false promises. Others resisted and paid with their lives. Who really profited? The transatlantic slave trade was orchestrated and industrialized by European powers: Portugal, Britain, France, Spain, the Netherlands. These nations built ships, funded voyages, and created entire economies off African labor. Banks, insurance companies, and ports in Liverpool, Lisbon, and Bordeaux flourished. While a few African intermediaries gained temporary power or wealth, they were not the architects. They were pawns in a system that was designed by and for European domination. The scapegoat strategy. As abolition movements grew in the 18th and 19th centuries, European societies began rewriting the narrative. To reduce guilt and justify colonization, they pushed the idea that Africans were equally to blame for their own enslavement. This argument conveniently erased the violence of European raids, the horror of the Middle Passage, and the deliberate destruction of African civilizations. It allowed former slave-trading empires to say, "We weren't the only ones," and to clean up their legacy. The ones who resisted. Not all African leaders participated. In fact, many resisted. Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba fought the Portuguese. King Tegbesu of Dahomey tried to control the trade to prevent exploitation. Leaders of the Ashanti and others negotiated, refused, or rebelled. Their stories have often been overshadowed by the more sensational tale of Africans selling Africans. But they represent a truth the West seldom teaches. Many Africans tried to protect their people and preserve their sovereignty. A convenient oversimplification. Saying Africans sold Africans erases the violence, deception, and global systems of white supremacy that powered the transatlantic slave trade. It ignores the racial ideology that turned people into property, families into commodities, and continents into colonies. It also implies that all Africans were one united group, when in reality, tribal, linguistic, and cultural distinctions shaped alliances and conflicts. The idea of selling their own is itself a distortion of how identity functioned in pre-colonial Africa. Reclaiming the truth, yes, there were African collaborators, but the system of slavery was not theirs. It was imported, industrialized, and enforced by Europeans. The narrative that blames Africa alone is a lie, a half-truth meant to suppress guilt and justify centuries of oppression. It's time we tell the whole story, not just for the sake of history, but for the dignity of the millions who lived, fought, died, and resisted. The truth is not always comfortable, but it's necessary. And it's long overdue.